Welcome to the Heart Path Podcast. I'm your host, Yvonne Ellis. The Heart Path Podcast spotlights authors, changemakers, nature lovers, and creators of all kinds. Each of our podcasts aim to share interviews and stories of beauty, resilience, and inspiration for all. Thank you so much for being here, Derek. It is a pleasure to have you here on the Heart Path Podcast. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about your adventure as Washington State's Poet Laureate. So what have you been up to lately?
Well, first, let me say, Yvonne, that it's a delight to be with you. And I love the name of your project, your work, your vocation here, the heartpath.org. That is just so beautiful. What better compass? I don't know of a better compass, really, or a path. And, when you first told me about the name of it, it made me think of this beautiful thought by Chado. He says, Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Traveler, there is no road. The road is made by walking. And so I'm so happy to be walking with you today.
I'm so happy to be walking with you.
So this adventure, I officially started May 1st, but I've been doing the kind of work that a poet laureate does for kind of a long time, more than 20 years out here in central Washington in a more rural part of the state. So, for example, April is such a special month for us, like the Heart Path, because it's not only Poetry Month, but it's Earth Month as well. And I typically have several events hither and yon. I'm hosting a week of Earth Month events at my college with my great colleague, Dr. Joan Causey, our geographer, who is really such a voice for sustainability on our campus, and then usually doing a few things here or there. So April was pretty crazy, and then I officially started May 1st. Summer was not terribly crazy. There was some life events going on for me, like I was trying to buy a house and move into a new house and doing a little bit of traveling, but there weren't gobs of events. Now I'm in the midst of gobs of events. So what happens is there's a portal that anybody, individuals, organizations, groups can put a request in for the poet laureate to come and do this or that at their location. So a bunch of requests came through in the spring, and I spent the summer coordinating a lot with different individuals. I was doing some events, like one of the really wonderful things I did in mid-August in Yakima was I made poetry part of the conversation at a conference called Serving Those Who Served, which is the, I think, preeminent gathering in the region for veterans and families of veterans and people who serve veterans. I did a little bit of a talk, and then I had a generative workshop, and I'll tell you, some pretty heavy stuff came through in that workshop, as you might imagine. So I did that and a few other things, but now I'm in a whirlwind of my own making because I said yes to almost everything. So I've got something going on every weekend. I'm going to every corner of the state.
Nice. Doing it. So can we talk a little bit about Cascadia Field Guide and the story behind Cascadia Field Guide?
For sure.
So where did you start?
Well, the story there starts with the Sonoran Desert, a literary field guide that was co-edited by Eric McGrain and Chris Kokinos and Paul Marocha was the illustrator, but Chris Kokinos and Eric McGrain were the two editors who put this kind of beautiful thing together. And when that came out, Simmons Bunton had been asked to write a poem for Desert Cottontail because that's part of the great work that these sorts of things do, is that they bring in these new poems and artworks celebrating other beings of the more than human world. Then he said, you should do one of these for the Pacific Northwest. This was in 2016. Well, it took me about 5 or 6 years before I finally said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Because every now and then he would remind me. He really knew what he was talking about. And I think part of it, too, is he has some sense of how special the sense of place is for people who live in the Pacific Northwest. And so I knew that it would be a lot of work. And I was so busy with other things, raising daughters, finishing my own book of poems, teaching classes. And then I came across Elizabeth Bradfield's work, and I thought, she's a naturalist poet too. She's someone I could do this with. And so finally I asked her, and she was very enthusiastic and jumped in. And then together we found C. Marie Furman. Liz knew of C. Marie, I think, through the people at University of Idaho, and C. Marie's book, Native Voices, which she had recently published. And so the three of us spent hundreds of hours over Zoom getting to know one another, because I didn't know Liz and I didn't know C. Marie. I mean, we met and got to know each other over Zoom working on this book. And that was really special. Maybe the most special thing about it, really. I mean, the book is pretty great, but getting to know those two souls and having that time with them and learning from them, what a beautiful gift to have during that time when, for many of us, there was more time suddenly, and to have it filled with that work and those people was beautiful. And indeed, it was a lot of work, which was one of the reasons I was kind of putting it off. And then with Liz involved, it became 10 times more than I thought it would be, more work, because that's just the way Liz rolls.
Well, I love that book, and I see it everywhere I go, at every bookstore I go to. Thank you for creating it. Thank you for collaborating with everyone to make it possible.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about Liz and C. Marie, but the three of us reaching out to the community of writers to write poems for beings that didn't already have one for them. We tried to find as many existing ones as we could, and we did pretty good with that, but we couldn't find one for cryptobiotic soil. We couldn't find one for Devil's Club. And so these were some of the beings that we commissioned poems into being for. About 40 of the poems came about that way. And there was some editing involved in that, and communication and collaboration and community. And then too, with all the visual artists, 14 different visual artists who are part of the group and the book. And we felt very good about how many Native writers and Native artists we were able to include. You really wanted to center on their voices, especially given the nature of the book.
Beautiful. I'm wondering if you'd like to talk a little bit about your work with terrain.org and when you started with them.
I started with them in 2013, right after my first book, Through the Second Skin, my first book of poems came out. I don't know how it happened. By the grace of Simmons, somehow I had started to get to know him a little bit. The funny thing is my relationship with terrain.org started with a rejection. My friend Andy Gottlieb had gone to the ASLE conference, Association for the Study of Literature and Environment, in Victoria, BC. And he's like, hey, have you heard about terrain.org? It's this really great online journal. And I met this guy, Simmons Bunton, and he's amazing. And I think you would love it. And so I investigated and liked what I saw. And I sent an essay in, and Simmons rejected it. So, oh, okay. Yeah, but I hung in there. I kept reading. And then later I sent some poems in, and he took a few. Oh, all right, great. But I like the fact that my relationship began with a rejection, because that's part of how it works. It's part of this community that we're involved in. And so many of us are just doing this volunteer work to make this sort of thing happen. Like terrain.org is just totally volunteer powered. But I was fortunate enough that Allison Deming reviewed my book for terrain.org. I don't know how Simmons made that happen, but it was like just sort of a dream, because Allison is a writer and a human I admire greatly. And oh, wow, to have a hero like that review your work was really special. And then right after she did that, Simmons contacted me and asked if I wanted to help edit nonfiction or fiction, and that wasn't really my thing. And I said no. And then he emailed again and he said, would you want to write a regular column for us? And I thought about it for a day or two. That sounded kind of nice, but my time was already so finite. My daughters were much younger then, at 5 and 7.5. And I thought, well, any time that I have for writing, I don't really want to be messing around with a column or essays or something like that. Poetry is my first love. And so I turned that down. I said, no, I don't want to write a column. So then he emailed again. He said, well, would you be the poetry editor?
Yeah.
And I said, sure. That was special because poetry is where he comes from too. His first 2 books are books of poetry. And for him to hand that off, I was the first person to start being the poetry editor since he'd been doing it starting back in 97 when terrain.org was born.
So when did Dear America come into the picture?
Well, that story also involves Allison Deming, because in November of 2016, when Trump had been elected president for the first time, Allison sent us a really powerful letter to America. We published it as nonfiction, and then as her letter really struck a chord and we started getting more work like Allison's, terrain.org evolved, and we added this new category, the letter to America, which has been essays and poems and artwork in response to all the issues and the cracks that became more evident at that time. And so we created this new part of Terrain to accommodate the cri de coeurs that were coming in. And then 4 years of that went by, and we realized we had a really powerful collection of work and thought maybe it should be in a book. And fortunately found a great partner in Trinity University Press who brought that out. And we were very successful in adding to the existing work of what we'd already published, and had people like Robin Wall Kimmerer and Jericho Brown and Arthur Z write new work for the book. Robin's essay, The Wendigo, is especially striking.
Mm-hmm. I actually was just talking about her today. In my book, The Lookout Chronicles, she is everywhere. I actually reference Braiding Sweetgrass more than any other book. I just love her writing so much. So thank you for including her. Something that I really appreciate about you, Derek, is that you are such an incredible networker and someone that actually cares about writing community. And I feel like you have a book for every single person that you've ever worked with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Between Dear America and Cascadia Field Guide, my gosh. Yeah, that's a good point. That's helpful. I appreciate that insight.
Yeah, and I appreciate everything that you do for writers and all the ways that you support writers that are out there. So thank you for your work doing that. Would you like to read something today?
While I was talking to you, a herd of 6 or 7 deer just
Ooh.
trundled by. So maybe I'll read a poem for them. Actually, can I read 2?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is the little one that the deer called into voice here. And it's one of the poems where the title spills into the text. A moment ago, you were following your steps across the driveway, head bent in the dusk toward one worry, then another, and the day's last chore in the plastic bag in your hand. It wasn't a sound or a touch, but something like the presence of a memory that made you stop and look up to find yourself nearly surrounded by the dim outlines of 8 or 10 deer. And here you are, still, as if you've stepped through the charcoaled air into a scene on a cave wall, the thin legs, where someone long ago, the lifted, expectant head and tense breath, tried to bring you to life.
What is this from?
This is from Not for Luck.
Oh, but Not for Luck is one of Derek's books. And how many books have you published now, Derek?
Let's see. 2 chapbooks, 2 full books of poetry, and 2 anthologies.
Wonderful.
222.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, and here's another one that I just thought of because Allison Deming has kept coming up in this conversation, as she should, and she just made this glorious book called The Gift of Animals that Story published this spring, I believe. It's a collection that is jam-packed with biophilia. And she kindly included this poem in that book. And then also, as I think about this poem, I'm thinking about Jane Goodall, who means so much to me. What a grace she was. What a member of our species. I was talking about her just a couple weeks ago. I was given this talk down at Lewis Clark State College, the Wallace Stegner Lecture. Jane Goodall was not trained as a scientist, but had so much curiosity and love for the natural world and had been reading about it in Tarzan books, dreaming about elephants and lions and chimpanzees and so forth. Went to Tanzania and observed a chimpanzee named David Graybeard pulling a twig, breaking a twig off a tree, stripping it, fashioning it so that he could use it as a tool to fish for termites in this log. And suddenly we needed to redefine humanity because up to that point, we were supposed to be the only tool-making species. That's how we thought of ourselves. That's how we distinguished ourselves from other animals. And no one has seen anything like this before? If she had been trained as a scientist, would she have seen that? Would she have observed that? I mean, it's a real question, but there was something about her and something about her dedication. It was love forward, right? Not objective collection of data and sticking to this protocol of visits and so forth. And no, it was her. It was this untrained person who was the first to witness this. No one else had before her. I mean, astonishing. And of course, we just lost her. She was on the road doing her work, putting out the good word, traveling again. Oh, I got to meet her once too. I bought a couple of her children's books that she wrote and had her sign them for my daughters. They're somewhere around here. I got to dig them out. Okay, so let's send this one out to Jane and Allison. It's called Contextual Education, and it has an epigraph locating it in Wenatchee, Washington. He wouldn't make us look like monkeys, says a student in the front row, 'cause he made us in his image. She laughs and turns to check for smiles and nods. The professor stands by the whiteboard where he has written the word adaptation. He's thinking of all the lessons, like similes, that have appeared in black ink across this space and that have, like species, gone. He cannot help but see her in the church van on the field trip, pretending she doesn't know she's the pretty one who doesn't know exactly what's happening inside the boy beside her when she tosses her pink-streaked hair and blows a word across his ear. In the room's silence, she shows them what she means by turning her hands into big ears and wagging her head. They wonder what sort of experiment they are as their professor turns off the lights and clicks a chimp's face onto the screen. No one says a thing at the god looking back from those brown, sad eyes.
Thank you for sharing your words, Derek.
For sure. It's been my pleasure, Yvonne. Thank you for the way you hear poems.